No one could have thought that a human being could be so demented and so evil.
My two little sisters right now are chained up.
Fred worries again without answers or his daughter.
There's something truly haunting about unsolved mysteries, beyond just the crime itself, but the deafening silence and unanswered questions that lay in its wake. Families shaken to their core, evidence that leads nowhere, and chilling details that just don't make any sense. After all of the breaking news stories and TV coverage, we're left with a feeling that someone, somewhere, must know the truth. In this video, I'll take you through some of the most disturbing, unsolved mysteries you've never heard of, starting at the tip of the iceberg, with 3 lesser-known cases that haven't seen much attention here on YouTube, but nonetheless have rattled the brains of dedicated internet sleuths for decades. These are the cases that don't just defy explanation. They make you question everything you knew about reality, with each story getting progressively more chilling. Welcome to Crime Bumps. This is Disturbing Unsolved Mysteries You've Never Heard of. Tucked away in the southwest corner of Australia is the quiet town of Nannup, known for its forests, rivers, and stillness. It's the kind of place where nothing really changes, where people live slowly, and secrets, if kept well enough, never have to come out. But in July of 2007, that calm would be shattered when 4 people, 2 adults, a teenager, and a small child, vanished without a trace. No struggle, no sign of violence, no goodbye. And it wouldn't be long before investigators realized this disappearance wasn't random. It had been carefully planned, down to the very last detail. This is the chilling story of the Nannup Disappearances. A mystery tangled in deception, cult ideology, and a mother's unwavering belief that the end of the world was near. At the center of the story was Chantel McDougall, a 27-year-old woman described as quiet, intelligent, and devoted to her family. Her 6-year-old daughter, Leela, was bubbly and bright, and like many other kids in rural parts of the country, she was homeschooled. While some parents may opt to homeschool their children for benign reasons, it can sometimes have a much darker side. The environment of control and secrecy afforded by homeschooling can become a tool to isolate children from society, and, as we'll soon see, it can foster the conditions for manipulation, grooming, or even indoctrination into cult-like ideologies. In Leela's case, her homeschooling environment was heavily influenced by the doomsday teachings of Simon Cadwell, who we'll talk more about shortly. With no exposure to traditional schooling, peers, or external authority figures, Leela's entire worldview was filtered through her mother and Cadwell's beliefs.
He also wrote 2 books, preaching that the only way to reach a higher spiritual plane was through death.
And tragically, this isn't an isolated example. Take the case of Marcus Wesson, a cult leader from California. Wesson homeschooled his children, and used that isolation to instill them with bizarre and disturbing religious teachings centered around incest, vampirism, and apocalypse. In 2004, Wesson was convicted of murdering 9 of his children in what remains one of the most horrifying cases of abuse concealed behind homeschooling.
9 lives taken too soon. Exactly 20 years ago, one of the most unthinkable mass murders in Fresno took place at this home in central Fresno. It's still unlike anything he's seen before, with 7 young kids all shot in the eye.
Another disturbing case is that of the Turpin family in California. David and Louise Turpin kept their 13 children out of school under the guise of homeschooling, but in reality, they were severely neglected, malnourished, and kept in near total isolation. The children were brainwashed into believing that their abuse was normal, and that outsiders were dangerous. It wasn't until one daughter managed to escape and contact police that the full extent of the horror was uncovered.
911 emergency, what are you reporting? I just went away from home because we have abusing parents. Did you hear that?
Okay, how did they abuse you?
Okay, they hit us, they throw us across, they like to throw us across the room. They pull our hair, they yank out our hair. I have my 2 little sisters right now are chained up.
Now back to our main story. Leela and her mom lived with Chantel's partner, Simon Cadwell, a man who most people believed was a mild-mannered writer, working on books about philosophy and the environment. But Simon Cadwell wasn't even his real name. He was actually Gary Felton, a man who had faked his own death years earlier in the UK and vanished from the record. And finally, there was Tony Poppich, a longtime friend of Simon's, who shared his unusual beliefs. Together, the four lived a secluded life on a rented property just outside of Nannup. They rarely spoke to neighbors. They didn't work traditional jobs. Instead, they focused their energy on spreading ideas from a strange self-published book Simon had written, called Servers of the Divine Plan.
He also wrote 2 books, preaching that the only way to reach a higher spiritual plane was through death.
In this book, Simon Cadwell, aka Gary Felton, claimed that a small group of people were chosen to serve a higher cosmic force, and that Earth would soon face an apocalyptic cleansing. Only those who were awakened would survive. Simon believed that he, Chantel, and even little Leela were among the servers, destined to play a critical role in humanity's rebirth. Neighbors and family members noticed a change in the group around 2006. They became more reclusive, paranoid. Chantel withdrew from her parents. The house grew quieter. And then, in July 2007, they were just gone. July 13th, 2007, the last confirmed sighting of any of the four was at a bank in Bustleton. Chantel was seen calmly withdrawing a large sum of money. Shortly after, their rental property was found abandoned. Inside, everything was left as if they were coming right back. Dishes in the sink, beds unmade, Leela's toys scattered across the living room. But their pets had been euthanized. Their car was dumped at a bus station in Perth. It was as if they had wiped the slate clean and simply disappeared. Police struggled to track them. There were no flight records, no passports flagged, no new addresses, and when they began digging into Simon Cadwell's identity, they uncovered the truth. He had faked his death in the UK in 2000, traveled under a fake name, and created an entirely new life in Australia. No one really knew who he was or what he was capable of. Some investigators believed the group had joined a cult. Others suspected mass suicide, though no bodies were ever found. Then there were reports, sightings of Chantel and Leela in South America, a witness who claimed to have spoken with someone matching Simon's description in Brazil. But none of these leads ever went anywhere. To this day, the Nannup Disappearances remain one of the most confounding cases in Australian history. There was no ransom, no motive for murder, just an invisible line between belief and delusion.
Going over and over it, it's very difficult, but I want to find out what happened or where they are, and so I'll just keep doing it till I find something.
Chantel's father still holds on to hope that somewhere, maybe in South America, maybe under new identities, his daughter and granddaughter are alive.
It's thought they may have died, but detectives can't rule out the possibility they're alive and living in isolation somewhere in Australia.
You get mixed feelings, because sometimes I think, oh, they've just sort of gone off the grid and hiding somewhere and just living their quiet lifestyle, and then sometimes I think something's happened to them.
But for the rest of us, this case is a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries don't come from foul play or criminal intent, but from the mind itself, from ideas that grow quietly in isolation until they convince you to leave everything behind forever. 4 lives, gone without a trace, and a question that lingers like fog in the forests of Nannup. What happens when you believe something so deeply that you're willing to follow it unquestioningly, no matter how dangerous of a path it puts you on? Sometimes a missing person case is so bizarre, so full of contradictions, that it doesn't just raise questions, it creates them. On a snowy February evening in 2004, a promising young college student crashed her car in a remote stretch of New Hampshire wilderness. Just minutes later, she was gone. No footprints, no trace. This is the disturbing and unsolved disappearance of Maura Murray. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Smart, athletic, beautiful, and perhaps most importantly for this story, someone who was struggling. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, something changed in Maura. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but beneath that surface, there were cracks. She was caught using stolen credit card numbers to order food. She had recently crashed her father's car late at night after a party, and just days before she vanished, she packed up her belongings into boxes, neatly, deliberately, almost like someone who knew she wouldn't be coming back. But why? Why would a high-achieving college student suddenly decide to disappear? It was a Monday afternoon, February 9th, 2004. Maura emailed her professors saying there had been a death in her family. This wasn't true. There had been no death. She told her employer she'd be gone for a week. Then, she emptied her bank account, just $280, and bought alcohol and snacks. What came next still baffles investigators to this day. Maura got in her black Saturn sedan and drove north, out of Massachusetts, through Vermont, and into New Hampshire. Her destination? Unknown. By 7:27 p.m., her car was found crashed off Route 112 in Haverhill, a rural area near the White Mountains. A local resident school bus driver named Rich Atwood stopped and offered help. Maura refused. She said she already called her car insurance company for roadside assistance, but call records showed that no call had been made. By the time police arrived minutes later, she was gone. Police found an empty car. The windshield was cracked. The airbags had deployed. Inside the vehicle were personal belongings, her book on mountain climbing, school assignments, and a packed bag of clothes, even her favorite stuffed animal. There were unopened alcohol containers, but there was also an open box of wine and some stains that looked like it had spilled, or worse. There were no footprints in the snow, no drag marks, no sign of a struggle, just nothing. It was as if Maura had stepped out of her life and into the forest, and simply disappeared. The disappearance of Maura Murray is one of the most puzzling and hotly debated missing persons cases in American history, and with no clear answers came wild theories. Some believe she ran away to start a new life. She had been struggling emotionally. Her relationship was strained. Her academic performance was slipping. Others believe she may have committed suicide in the woods nearby, but no remains were ever found, despite years of searches, dogs, drones, and cadaver teams. Then there's the darker theory that Maura was picked up by someone who took advantage of her isolation. Some even point fingers at locals. Online sleuths found discrepancies in interviews, gaps in police records, rumors of a nearby house with a strange basement, but again, nothing concrete. And finally, there's the disturbing possibility that Maura was running from something or someone. What was she planning? Why lie about a family death? And why drive into the middle of nowhere with no clear reason?
Fred Murray is again without answers or his daughter.
Stick my nose back on the trail, that's all I can do.
It's been over 2 decades since Maura vanished. Her family, especially her late father, Fred Murray, never stopped searching. They hired private investigators, they organized search parties, they pressured law enforcement. But the trail is as cold now as it was that snowy night in 2004. There's no closure, no justice, just a chilling reminder that even in the age of digital footprints and constant surveillance, someone can still vanish into thin air. And when they do, all that's left behind is a mystery. She was 21, she was bright, and she was scared. But where she went and why remains one of the most disturbing mysteries you've never heard of. Sometimes, the scariest disappearances aren't the ones involving elaborate schemes or high-profile criminals. Sometimes they happen in the most ordinary of places, with nothing but the darkness, a gravel road, and a single phone call that ends in silence. This is the disturbing and unsolved case of Brandon Swanson. It was the early hours of May 14th, 2008, when 19-year-old Brandon Swanson disappeared without a trace in a quiet stretch of rural Minnesota. Brandon had just finished his first year of college at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. He was studying wind energy and seemed like your average motivated kid. That night, he decided to celebrate the end of finals with friends from 2 different towns, first in Canby, then in Lind. At around 1:30 in the morning, he got in his car to drive home to his parents in Marshall, a town only 30 minutes away. Should have been a short, uneventful trip, but Brandon never made it home. At 1:54 a.m., Brandon called his parents. His voice was calm, maybe slightly frustrated. He said he had accidentally driven his car into a ditch and couldn't get it out, but he wasn't hurt. He just needed a ride. He told them he believed he was near the town of Lind. His father, Brian Swanson, got in his truck and drove out to find him. Meanwhile, they stayed on the phone together for nearly 47 minutes straight. Brandon described his surroundings: gravel roads, lights in the distance, occasional sounds of passing traffic. But when his parents arrived in Lind, there was no sign of Brandon, no car, no flashing hazards, nothing. Brandon stayed on the phone, growing more confused and agitated. Finally, he told his dad he was going to start walking toward what he believed were city lights. He said, "Oh shit." And then the line went dead. Brandon Swanson was never seen or heard from again. The next morning, police began searching. Initially, they believed Brandon's car must be somewhere near Lind, like he had said, but they found nothing in the area. Then, a major twist. Brandon's car was found 25 miles away, in a completely different direction, near the town of Taunton, a remote dirt road surrounded by farmland. This was nowhere near Lind. And the area around the car? No signs of struggle, no footprints. Just an abandoned vehicle with a full battery and a young man who had seemingly walked off into thin air. Cadaver dogs later traced Brandon's scent from the car along a gravel road into a ditch, and then up the other side. The trail continued for a short distance, then stopped cold. Several theories have emerged in the years since. The first is simple, but chilling, that Brandon fell into a nearby river. He had mentioned hearing running water during his phone call, and one of the dogs followed his scent to the edge of the Yellow Medicine River, but the water level was low at the time, and extensive searches, including sonar and dive teams, found no body, no clothing, no phone, nothing. Another theory suggests he may have succumbed to hypothermia or injury while walking through unlit terrain, but again, no remains have ever been found. The third theory is more unsettling, that Brandon had been picked up by someone after the call dropped, someone who meant him harm. While there's no conclusive evidence to support foul play, the complete lack of physical remains, even after thousands of volunteer hours, dogs, helicopters, and aerial drones, has led some to suggest something far more sinister. Despite everything, Brandon's parents never gave up. They lobbied lawmakers and helped pass what's now called Brandon's Law in Minnesota, legislation that requires police to immediately begin investigating reports of missing adults under suspicious circumstances. Because before this, authorities didn't take his disappearance seriously at first. They assumed he had just wandered off or would come back in the morning. He didn't. To this day, the case of Brandon Swanson remains open. No suspects, no remains, no answers. It's been over 15 years since Brandon vanished. His phone call, those 47 minutes, are the only concrete clues anyone has. A young man alone in the night believing he was somewhere he wasn't. And whatever happened next, lost forever in the darkness. If you found this story disturbing, you're not alone. Be sure to subscribe for more unsettling true crime cases. Until next time, this is Crime Bumps, and I'll see you in the next one.